What would you do if a hidden camera in your own home showed you the one devastating thing you never wanted to see? My name is Grant Holloway, 38 years old, and last month, the curated gallery of my life cracked wide open on a cold laptop screen. I had installed those hidden cameras to protect my family after a terrifying string of neighborhood break-ins, a precaution I casually forgot to mention to my wife, Melissa. At the time, I thought it was no big deal, just a husband being a silent guardian. But when the app warned me the storage was full, I sat down to review the footage and saw a silver Honda pulling into my driveway again and again, with sickening regularity, until the moment Melissa opened our front door and wrapped her arms around a man who wasn't me with a passion that felt like a physical assault. If you have ever faced a truth that punched straight through your chest and left you gasping for air, stay with me. Subscribe and follow this story, because the descent into this betrayal only gets harder and more brutal from here. When I was only 8 years old, I came home from school to a house that was unnaturally quiet. There were no cartoons blaring, no rhythmic clattering of pans in the kitchen. There was just a single, jagged sheet of paper on the counter written in my father's hurried, desperate handwriting. He said the crushing weight of money stress was too much to bear. He said he simply couldn't do it anymore. Then, like a ghost, he was gone. After that, it was my mom and me against a cold, indifferent world. She picked up every grueling shift she could get. Nights at the hospital, days at a greasy diner, her eyes perpetually red and her feet swollen until they bled. Yet she was still somehow packing my lunch with a shaky hand every morning. Most evenings, our life consisted of canned noodles, the sickly blue glow of the TV, and that hauntingly empty chair where my father used to sit. She never badmouthed him, not once, despite the abandonment. She just kept saying, "We'll be okay, Grant. I'll keep a roof over our heads if it kills me." Watching her drag her exhausted body through each day, I felt something cold and hard crystallize inside my soul. I looked at that empty chair and made the kind of absolute promise only a traumatized kid can make. I will never, ever be that man. But I had no idea that very promise would one day become the wrecking ball that destroyed my marriage. By 16, while other kids were wasting gas and time on trivialities, I was stocking heavy shelves and flipping burgers until my skin smelled like grease. Every paycheck, I'd stare at the numbers with a hungry intensity, then stash most of it away in a secret account. I wasn't chasing a flashy sports car or some grand, unreachable dream. I was running as fast as I could from the memory of my mom at the kitchen table, sobbing over stacks of bills she tried to hide from me. I studied because I had to survive, not because I loved the books. Community college, exhausting night classes, any path that smelled like the sweet scent of stability. Eventually, I landed in finance, nothing flashy or prestigious, just steady, honest work helping other people avoid drowning in the same money panic I grew up in. In my head, being a man was simple, binary math. You put food on the table, you keep the lights on, and you always show up. I didn't have a wife yet, didn't have a kid, didn't even have a house with my name on the deed. But somewhere along the way, I started looking in the mirror and thinking, like it or not, I'm the man of the house now. And one day, I told myself, this had better mean nobody under my roof ever feels the hollow terror I felt as a kid. All that provide, protect, don't be your father ideology was just academic theory until I met Melissa. I was sitting in the sterile waiting room at a dental clinic, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a voice at the front desk, soft, steady, and incredibly patient, calming down an old man who was visibly terrified of getting a root canal. I looked up and saw her. Melissa. She had a simple ponytail and tired eyes, but a real, luminous smile. Not the fake, polished customer service kind, but the kind my mom used to have when she was dead on her feet, but still trying to be brave. We made small talk while I was checking out, talking about the weather and work. Then somehow the conversation turned toward the future. She said, "One day, I just want to be a mom, like, full-time, to actually be there for them." That hit something so deep in me it felt like a bell ringing. Here was a woman who wanted the job my mother never got to fully have because she was too busy surviving. Our first dates were nothing fancy or expensive. Cheap diners, split orders of fries, and driving around the silent suburbs with the windows down, talking about everything and nothing until the sun came up. Somewhere between the bitter coffee and the late-night drives, I remember thinking as clear as day. I honestly believed Melissa was my forever person, the anchor to my ship. A few years later, I was standing in front of her with a diamond ring I'd saved for way too long, my hands shaking more than I care to admit. She said yes before I could even finish the sentence, her eyes shining with what I thought was pure love. We didn't have some huge, over-the-top fairy tale wedding, just a small, intimate ceremony in a local church. I was in a rented suit. She was in a simple white dress, surrounded by family and a few close friends. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right, solid, and undeniably real. Not long after, we signed our names on a 30-year mortgage for a 2-story place in the Colorado suburbs. It had beige siding, a tiny backyard, and creaky steps. But to me, it was a castle, a fortified roof that was finally ours. I started working 50, 60 hours a week, grinding through long days and late calls, but I did everything in my power to make it home for dinner. Sitting across from her at that little kitchen table made the exhausting grind feel worth every second. Melissa told me more than once, "One day, I just want to stay home with our kids. I want to be there for them." And I looked her straight in the eye and promised, "I'll make sure you can." In those moments, I felt like I was finally keeping that ancient promise to the 8-year-old kid inside me. My family won't ever go through what I went through. I honestly, foolishly thought I was doing everything right. I still remember the night Melissa told me she was pregnant. We were standing in the kitchen, half-eaten leftovers on the counter, when she slid a little plastic stick across the table. I saw the lines, looked up at her face, and we both just broke down. Not in a bad way. Tears, shaking, laughing like absolute idiots in that tiny, cramped kitchen. After that, I cranked my life into a desperate overdrive. More clients, longer hours, saying yes to every grueling meeting I could find. Not because I wanted a bigger truck or a fancy European vacation, but because there was a kid coming who was never going to feel the kind of primal fear I grew up with. When they finally handed me Noah in the hospital, this little, red, angry bundle of life, I felt my whole chest cave in with a love I didn't know existed. I counted his tiny fingers, his toes, and whispered, "I got you, buddy," into his ear like a sacred oath. Melissa decided to quit her job and stay home with him full-time, and I backed her 100%. That was the dream, right? Being a provider mattered, but in that moment, holding him, I knew one thing for certain. Being a dad was the one job I refused to fail at, no matter the cost. For a while, it felt like we had actually nailed the American dream. I went to work in the morning, and Melissa stayed home to raise Noah. By the time I pulled into the driveway at night, there'd be colorful toys in the yard and tiny fingerprints on the glass. That beautiful mess used to feel like definitive proof I was doing something right. Evenings were simple. Dinner at the table, nothing fancy, just whatever we could throw together, with Noah in his booster seat smearing food everywhere. Melissa would laugh while I pretended to be mad at the mess. After that, we'd pile onto the couch, some kids' show droning in the background, while I helped Noah build lopsided Lego towers on the coffee table. There was a quiet, profound kind of peace in those routines. The bills were paid, there was a roof over our heads, and my kid was safe asleep down the hall. For a guy who grew up on canned noodles and an empty chair, that felt like absolute luxury. Sometimes I'd apologize for the long hours, but Melissa would just shake her head and say, "You're doing what a man's supposed to do, Grant." And I believed her. For a long time, I honestly believed we were unbreakable. But perfect lives don't crack all at once. They crack quietly, in the dark, and then they collapse with a deafening roar. For a long time, the worst thing that ever happened on our street was a kid riding his bike too fast. Then, one week, everything shifted. First, it was a post on the neighborhood Facebook group about someone's garage being broken into 2 blocks over. Then another house. Then another. The next-door neighbor's feed lit up with doorbell clips and grainy screenshots of guys in hoodies moving in the middle of the day, in and out in minutes. We had a community meeting at the local church, folding chairs, burnt coffee, and worried faces. Officer Ramirez stood up front, walking us through the grim reality. Daytime hits, grabbing electronics, jewelry, anything they could flip fast. He kept saying, "Make your house a harder target. Lights, signs, cameras. Don't make it easy for them." I sat there thinking about Melissa and Noah alone at home while I was across town in an office, staring at spreadsheets, the front door perhaps unlocked for a package, the backyard gate half closed. I've never seen myself as some paranoid, tinfoil hat guy, but something in my gut wouldn't shut up. Protect your family. After that meeting, I went down a deep rabbit hole of security. Not conspiracy videos, just Amazon reviews and comparison charts. Blink, Ring, Wise. Every brand had 100 conflicting opinions under it. I wasn't looking to turn my house into Fort Knox. I just wanted something simple. A couple of small, discrete cameras, motion alerts, and an app on my phone so I could check in while I was stuck in traffic on the way to my next client. I settled on a basic 4-camera system, one for the front door, one for the backyard, and 2 inside covering the living room and kitchen. No mics, no crazy expensive subscriptions, just local storage and motion detection, an extra layer of peace of mind. That's how I justified the price tag to myself. In my head, this was simply what a man of the house does. You don't wait for something horrific to happen and then cry about it. You get ahead of it. I wasn't trying to spy on anyone. I wasn't chasing drama. I just wanted to keep my family safe from the wolves. One weekend, Melissa packed up Noah and drove him over to her parents' place for a visit. It was just me and the quiet house. For the first time in a while, the silence actually felt useful. I opened the boxes and got to work, mounting one camera over the front door watching the driveway, one in the backyard covering the fence line, one in the living room, and one in the kitchen where most of our life actually happened. I synced them to the app, walked around like an idiot waving at my phone, and tweaked the angles until the shots looked perfect. By the time I finished, my back hurt, my head was pounding, and I still had laundry in the dryer. I remember thinking, I'll tell Melissa when she gets back. No rush. It's just security. Then work got busy, Noah got sick, and life piled on top of life. I didn't hide the cameras on purpose. I just never brought it up. And that one lazy mistake changed the entire course of my existence. For a while after that, the cameras were just another ignored app on my phone. Every now and then on my lunch break, I'd tap it open and see Melissa chasing Noah through the living room or him parked in front of a cartoon while she folded laundry. Nothing dramatic, just the mundane beauty of life. The break-ins in the neighborhood slowed down as people put up motion lights and protected by signs. The group chat stopped buzzing so much, and things went back to normal, or at least that's how it felt. Meanwhile, my phone kept lighting up with motion alerts, but half of them were just Melissa walking through the kitchen or Noah running past the camera with a toy over his head. After a couple of weeks of constant buzzing, I shut the notifications off. The system kept recording silently in the background, filling up its little memory card day after day. I barely thought about it. In my mind, the house was safe. My family was fine. Everything was under control. The cameras just faded into the background until that one fateful notification. It happened on a random Friday afternoon while I was between meetings, killing a few minutes in a parking lot, when my phone buzzed. Not a text, not an email, but a little banner from the camera app one hadn't opened in months. Storage almost full. Old footage will be deleted in 48 hours. I almost swiped it away. Then I thought, it could be nice to see what the house looks like when I'm not there. I imagined seeing Melissa in the kitchen or Noah running around in his socks. The everyday stuff I missed while I was out killing myself at work to provide for them. On the drive home, I made a plan. Saturday morning. No work, no errands, just me, a cup of coffee, and 6 or 7 months of our life on a screen. A private little highlight reel of the family I was so damn proud of. The next morning, I closed my home office door, set my coffee down, opened my laptop, and logged into the app. I thought I was about to watch sweet family moments. I was tragically wrong. What I found wasn't a highlight reel. It was cold, hard evidence of a betrayal so deep it defied comprehension. The first clips were exactly what I expected. I scrubbed through days at double speed, watching my family live their lives without me. There was Melissa sweeping up crumbs, switching laundry, and talking on the phone with a dish towel over her shoulder. Noah was chasing a ball through the living room, tripping over his own feet, and popping back up like it was nothing. I saw sunlight cutting across the kitchen table while she helped him with a snack. Little things, the kind of moments you don't think about when you're in them. The kind you miss when you're in traffic on the other side of town trying to close a deal. I found myself smiling at the screen like an idiot. My son was laughing. My wife was spinning him around in the kitchen, both of them out of breath and happy. For a minute, it felt good. I leaned back in my chair and thought, this is what I'm busting my ass for. This is the payoff. For a while, all I saw was a normal, happy home. Then, I kept scrolling. Somewhere around month 4 or 5 in the footage, something started to feel fundamentally off. I was skipping through days on fast forward when a car caught my eye. A silver Honda parked in my driveway in the early afternoon. At first, I didn't think much of it. It could have been a delivery, a neighbor turning around, or somebody lost. But a few days later in the footage, there it was again. Same angle, same car, same time of day. I rewound, checked the date stamp, then jumped ahead a week. There it was again. That little itch in the back of my brain woke up and started screaming. I slowed the playback down every time that Honda appeared, watching it roll into the frame like it belonged there. Once or twice is random. 3, 4, 5 times is a pattern. Same car, same time of day, over and over. I didn't know what was wrong yet, but I knew something was rotting. Cars don't lie. People do. The next time the silver Honda showed up on the screen, I didn't fast forward. I let it play in agonizing real time. The car stops. The engine cuts off. The driver's door opens, and some guy I've never seen in my life steps out. He's in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, casual clothes, no uniform, no clipboard, no package in his hands. And the way he moved, he didn't look around, didn't check the house number, didn't hesitate at the sidewalk the way you do when you're not sure you're at the right place. He just shut the door, adjusted his jacket, and walked straight up my driveway toward my front door like he had done it 100 times before. I was leaning in toward the laptop before I even realized it, my heart starting to pound against my ribs for no good reason I could yet explain. Who the hell is this guy? I muttered to myself. Then the truth hit me all at once, cold and sharp as a razor. He walked up to my front door like he owned the place. I kept my eyes glued to the screen as the guy reached my porch. A second later, the front door opened, and Melissa stepped into the frame. She was smiling, not the tight, little, polite smile she gives delivery guys. This was a full, relaxed, radiant smile, like she'd been looking forward to this specific moment all day long. There's no audio on that camera, so I couldn't hear a word they said, but I didn't need sound to read the unmistakable body language. She leaned in. He leaned in, and she wrapped her arms around him, slow, familiar, holding on just a little too long. That was not a thanks for dropping this off hug. That was an I've missed you hug, the kind I hadn't felt from her in a very long time. They turned and disappeared into my house together, out of the frame, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I realized my hand was still on the mouse, frozen. My whole body felt hollow. like someone had reached through the screen and punched me right in the gut. But that hug was nothing compared to what I saw next inside my own living room. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the empty doorway on the screen, telling myself I hadn't really seen what I'd just seen. Then I dragged the timeline back and watched it again. Same car, same walk, same smile, same hug. My brain went straight into desperate damage control. Maybe he's family, a cousin, an old friend from high school, somebody she just forgot to mention. I racked my memory for the name Derek. I'd heard it once, maybe twice, someone from the gym, an old coworker, always tossed out casually enough that I never thought twice. Now, every half-remembered mention felt like a red flag I had fatally ignored. I pulled up footage from other days around the same time. There was the Honda again. There he was again. Always the same rhythm. Arrive, smile, hug, and disappear inside. My gut already knew what this was, but my heart was still fighting it with everything it had. I wanted so badly to believe there was an innocent explanation. At some point, replaying that front door hug wasn't enough. I needed to know what happened after they disappeared. So, I switched cameras. Living room, same date, same time. There they were, Melissa and this guy, Derek, sitting on our couch. My couch. 2 glasses were on the coffee table. They were talking, laughing, leaning toward each other like they didn't have a care in the world. At first, it was just conversation and smiles. Then their knees touched, and neither of them moved away. His hand brushed against hers and stayed there. She didn't flinch, she didn't pull back. After a while, she shifted closer, her shoulder resting against him like it lived there. He put his arm around her, casual, practiced, like he'd done it 100 times. And then, right there in my living room, under the TV I paid for and the pictures of our son on the wall, he pulled her in and kissed her. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a bad angle. They were doing things a married woman has no business doing with any man but her husband. Once that line was crossed on screen, something in me snapped from maybe to this is real. I stopped looking for excuses and started looking for the extent of the betrayal. I pulled up the calendar view on the app. Day after day, week after week. Every time I saw that little motion marker around early afternoon, I clicked it. The same silver Honda in the driveway, the same man at my front door, the same easy smile on Melissa's face. Sometimes they'd sit and talk first. Sometimes he'd barely be inside before they were all over each other. Different days, different clothes, same story. Laughing, touching, kissing, and disappearing out of frame together. If it had been one bad night, one drunk mistake, I don't know how I would have handled it. I'm not saying I'd have forgiven her, but at least I could have put it in a box in my head. But this was scheduled, repeated, and meticulously maintained. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This was an entire second life living inside my house. And I realized I'd been the only one who thought we were still in a marriage. Catching them together in the living room was bad enough. I could have stopped there. I should have stopped there, but I kept digging, and what I found next was the ultimate betrayal. One clip popped up on a weekday when I knew Noah wasn't at preschool. We'd kept him home with a mild fever. I didn't see him anywhere on the living room camera, which felt wrong. If Noah's awake, you know it. He's in every room at once. I checked the timestamp, then switched over to the hallway camera. There was Melissa walking Noah down the hall. She led him into his bedroom, said something, then pulled the door shut. A second later, the handle turned from the outside like she was making sure it was locked and closed. A few minutes after that, Derek walked in the front door like always. Melissa met him, laughing, touching his arm, leading him right back to the living room, where they curled up together while my son was shut in his room. No cartoons, no toys on the floor, just a closed door and a muffled, frustrated little cry every now and then from my sick son. She locked our 4-year-old in his room so she could be alone with her lover. I thought betrayal had a limit. I was wrong. If that had been the worst of it, maybe I could have told myself she just lost her mind for a season. But it kept getting uglier. I pulled up another day, one where Noah was supposed to be at preschool. The school schedule is burned into my brain. Drop off at 9 o'clock, pick up at noon. Simple. The camera timeline showed motion at the front door a little after 11 a.m., Derek arriving again. I watched the timestamps crawl, 11:15, 11:40, 12:05. They were still in my house, still touching, still laughing, still wrapped up in their little illicit bubble. The first time Melissa showed up on camera leaving the house was a little after 1 p.m. Hair fixed, makeup touched up, like she'd just gotten ready for the day. Keys in hand. She was rushing out like she was late for something important. All I could see in my head was Noah sitting in a tiny plastic chair by the preschool door, lunchbox in his lap, watching other kids run into the arms of moms who actually showed up on time. My little boy was sitting there waiting and wondering while his mom was too busy cheating to care. At some point, my brain just hit a wall. I closed the laptop because I physically couldn't take in one more second of the video. The room went quiet, but inside my head, it was loud as hell. I don't know if I sat there for 10 minutes or 2 hours. Time kind of broke. All the years I'd spent building this life, every late night at the office, every "I'm fine" when I wasn't, every sacrifice suddenly felt like they were made out of fragile glass and someone had taken a sledgehammer to them. I kept seeing the same images on a loop. Melissa smiling at him, Melissa locking Noah in his room, Melissa fixing her hair in the hallway mirror before letting Derek in. And underneath all of it was this one question that made me physically sick. Did any of it mean anything to her? Any of the vows, the talks, the plans? It didn't just break my heart, it incinerated my soul. Eventually, real life forced its way back in. I heard cabinets in the kitchen, Noah's little footsteps, the clink of plates, dinner time, family time. I wiped my face, took a breath that didn't do a damn thing, and walked out of the office like I hadn't just watched my marriage die on a screen. Melissa was at the stove, Noah babbling about something with his cars. She glanced up, studied me for a second, and said, "You okay? You look off." I lied without even thinking. Rough day at work. Client being a pain. She nodded, gave me this soft, concerned look like she was still my teammate. Then she reached out, put her hand on my arm, and gave me that small, gentle smile, the same one I'd just watched her give another man hours prior. So, I sat there at the table eating dinner with my wife and my son, playing my part, while every nerve in me was screaming. Watching her act like a loving wife after what I'd seen was its own special kind of hell. Over the next few days, I caught myself just watching her, not the cameras this time, but her in real life. I watched the way she moved around the kitchen, the way she laughed at something on her phone, the way she'd drift off into her own little world mid-conversation, then snap back with a smile. Before, I'd written all that off as her being tired or needing a break. Now, every gesture felt like part of a deceitful script I hadn't known she was reading from. She'd be texting, grin at the screen, and when I asked, "Who's that?" she'd toss out, "Just one of the girls." And all I could hear in my mind was Derek's name. At night, she'd say, "I love you," roll over, and go to sleep like nothing was wrong. Those 3 words used to feel like home. Now they sounded like a death sentence. I started wondering how many of our good memories were built on a foundation of lies. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated fire. There were moments I wanted to walk into the living room, grab her phone, throw the clips up on the big TV, and make her watch herself in high definition. I wanted to make her see what I saw, to make her feel even half of the agonizing betrayal I was feeling. In my head, I rehearsed the confrontation 100 ways, the shouting, the accusations, the "how could you?" But every time I played that movie in my mind, there was always one constant: Noah. I saw him standing in the doorway, eyes wide with fear, him crying when the voices got too loud. I saw him watching plates slam down or doors slam shut, and not understanding why his safe place suddenly wasn't safe anymore. One night, lying awake next to a woman I no longer trusted, I asked myself, if I blow this up right now, who pays the highest price? The answer wasn't me. It wasn't even her. It was our little boy. My anger wanted to destroy her, but my love for my son told me to be smart. So, I made the hardest choice a father can make. I chose silence until I was ready to strike. After that, every thought I had ran through the same filter. Is this good for Noah? I couldn't get that image out of my head. My little boy shut in his room, tiny hands on the door, while his mother laughed with another man a few feet away. It didn't feel like just cheating anymore. It felt like a total abandonment of duty. Melissa hadn't only betrayed me as a wife. She betrayed the one job I thought she wanted most, being a mom. And that's when the memory of my own mom came back into focus. Dead on her feet, working 3 jobs, but still showing up at every school play, still waiting in the parking lot on time, still making sure I never wondered if she cared. She never locked me away so she could have adult time. Putting those 2 women side by side in my mind made something crystal clear. I could forgive a lot as a husband, but as a father, I could never let this slide. I could live with being a divorced man, but I couldn't live with being the kind of father who allows his son to be neglected. Once I put the word divorce in my head, even quietly, everything looked different. I started thinking back to our wedding day, standing there in that rented suit, listening to the pastor say, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. I remember taking those words like a contract written in blood, non-negotiable. Now, watching Melissa move through our house like nothing was wrong, I realized I'd been the only one still honoring that contract. It hit me like a second wave of shame, not just hurt, but total humiliation. I felt like the last guy in the room who doesn't know the joke is about him, the husband playing happy family, while everyone else had already seen the ending. Pain I could handle. I'd been dealing with pain since I was 8. But this quiet, crawling sense that I'd been living in a story that only existed in my head, that was something else entirely. I realized our marriage was a ghost. On her side, it had already ended. And as much as it killed me to admit it, I knew I deserved better than this, and Noah sure as hell did. Once I admitted the marriage was dead, the next ugly step was obvious. I needed a lawyer. I sat at the kitchen table late at night with my laptop open, the same house around me that I was now systematically planning to walk away from. I searched for family law attorney Colorado custody adultery. I read reviews, scanned star ratings, and looked for words like custody battles, father's rights, and high conflict divorce. Every name I clicked felt like another little crack in the life I thought I had. I asked a coworker who'd been through a nasty divorce, and he slid a business card across my desk, Baker Law Group. Not cheap, he said, but they are the absolute best at what they do. I put all the footage onto a USB drive, months of my wife's betrayal compressed into a few cold gigabytes of evidence. The night before my appointment, I barely slept. It felt like I was betraying Melissa and protecting Noah at the exact same time. Walking into that lawyer's office the next morning felt like walking into the end of my old life. Baker's office was neat and quiet, smelling of expensive coffee and copier paper. I sat across from him with that USB drive in my hand, gripping it so hard my fingers ached. He asked me to start from the beginning, so I did. The cameras, the silver Honda, the hugs, Noah locked in his room, the preschool pickups an hour late. I kept it as factual as I could, but my voice still cracked. I pushed the USB across the desk. He plugged it in and watched the footage like he was reviewing security tapes from a convenience store robbery, not the collapse of a family. No flinching, no shock, just a slow, methodical nod. When it was over, he leaned back and said, "This is strong evidence, Grant. Adultery plus documented neglect. Judges pay attention to that. It will help significantly with custody and with blocking alimony." Hearing that was like getting oxygen and a knife at the same time. It felt fundamentally wrong that I needed evidence to prove my wife was dangerous for my son, but I was grateful I had it. Baker laid it out like a brutal battle plan. "Don't confront her yet," he warned. "Stay quiet. Keep the cameras running. We'll file for divorce, ask for primary custody, and serve her when your son's at school. You don't want him in the blast radius when she realizes the game is up." Every part of me that was a husband wanted to scream, "No, I'm done right now," but the part of me that was a father knew he was right. So, we started the paperwork, petitions, financial disclosures, and custody requests. All those cold legal words that basically mean, take this life apart and divide the pieces. My job was to go home and act like I knew absolutely none of it. Same good morning kiss. Same small talk about groceries. Same love you, drive safe. Inside, I'd already left the marriage. On paper, I was still in it. I was already done, but for a few more weeks, I had to keep playing my role for the sake of the legal strategy. I did it for one reason, Noah. Pretending was easy. Sleeping in the same house with her, however, was a nightmare. Those next few weeks were the strangest of my life. On the surface, nothing changed. Melissa still texted, still laughed to herself, and still went out for errands. And like clockwork, the silver Honda kept showing up when I was at work. Only now, every visit added to a folder in my mind labeled evidence, not heartbreak. I'd come home, eat dinner with her, put Noah to bed, then sit alone in my office and review the footage Baker told me to save. The hugs, the kisses, the way she fixed her hair before opening the door for her lover. I saw it all. At some point, my hand stopped shaking when I hit play. The shock wore off and turned into something colder, more detached. I stopped seeing her as my wife on that screen. I started seeing her as the woman actively hurting my son. But every time Noah's little body wandered into the frame, a toy in his hand, looking for a mother who was too busy with someone else, my chest tightened. He was the only reason I was still in that house. The morning we served the papers, Noah had preschool. I packed his lunch, tied his shoes, and kissed the top of his head like it was any other day. Melissa poured her coffee and asked what time I'd be home, completely unaware that a process server would be knocking on our door in a few hours with an envelope that would incinerate her world. On the drive to work, my stomach was in knots. Baker had timed it perfectly, so the server would come by late morning when Melissa was usually home alone. I kept checking my phone, even though I knew it wouldn't make it any easier. Around late morning, her name lit up my screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, took a long breath, then answered. Her voice was shaking, angry, and terrified all at once. "Grant, what is this? Divorce papers? What are you doing?" I listened, waiting for that old familiar stab in my chest, but hearing her say, "What is this?" didn't hurt as much as I expected. I was already gone. She didn't ease into it. She went straight to shouting. "How could you do this? Why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked on this. You blindsided me." I let her vent for a few seconds, then cut in, calm in a way that surprised even me. "Melissa," I said, "I've already seen all the footage." There was a long, heavy, deafening silence on the line. I could almost hear her brain scrambling, replaying every moment she thought she'd hidden so well. When she spoke again, her voice was much smaller. First came the pathetic denial. "It's not what you think." Then the desperate begging. "Please, we can fix this." And finally, the inevitable blame. "If you weren't always at work, if you actually paid attention to me." I let her finish, then answered firmer this time. "This isn't about me not being perfect," I said. "This is about you locking our son in his room so you could cheat. This is about you leaving him sitting at preschool while you were busy with another man. You didn't just cheat on me, Melissa," I told her. "You cheated on Noah." The weeks after that phone call were a blur of paperwork and waiting rooms, petitions, affidavits, financial statements. Every signature felt like another shovel of dirt on the grave of our marriage. Melissa hired her own lawyer and came out swinging, demanding alimony and equal time with Noah. On paper, she tried to act like she was the stable parent and I was just the paycheck. Then came the hearings. Fluorescent lights, stiff chairs, and a judge who'd seen way too many families fall apart to be shocked by one more. Baker laid it all out, not with emotion, but with undeniable facts. The dates, the affair, the footage of Noah locked in his room, and the timestamps showing Melissa leaving the house long after preschool pickup time. They played some of the clips. No sound, just the raw images of her betrayal. Melissa stared down at the table while her own life played on the screen behind her. For the first time, other people could see what I'd seen alone on that laptop. It didn't feel good, it just felt necessary. The day of the final decision, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, no matter how tight I clenched them. Melissa sat at the other table, eyes red, lawyers on both sides like bookends. The judge went through everything slowly. The marriage, the affair, the cameras, the neglect of the child, our finances, and the prenup we'd signed back when we actually believed in forever. Then he said the part that mattered most to me. Primary physical custody of Noah would go to me. Melissa would get supervised visitation to start, with mandatory counseling and parenting classes required before anything more. Because of the prenup and the documented adultery and neglect, there would be no alimony. We'd split the assets according to the agreement, and I'd keep the house so Noah wouldn't have to lose his home on top of everything else. It was objectively a win, but sitting there listening to the judge dismantle the life I tried so hard to build, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt like Noah had finally been given a real chance. Winning in court doesn't mean you win in life. After the dust settled, it was just me and Noah in that house. Same address, same rooms, but it felt like a completely different world. I cut my hours back at the firm, telling them I'd take fewer clients and fewer late meetings. They didn't love it, but I wasn't asking for permission anymore. Mornings became our sacred time. I learned how to burn pancakes a little less each week. I learned how he likes his milk and which shirt he calls his super shirt. Drop-offs, pickups, and grocery runs with him riding in the cart like it was a race car became the highlights of my week. At night, instead of coming home wired from work and full of tension, I'd read him the same books over and over until his eyes finally closed. There were no slammed doors, no cold silences, just a tired dad and a little boy breathing easy. It took me a while to see it, but it was there. Noah was whining less, sleeping deeper, and having fewer bad dreams. It hit me that my son was more at peace without the perfect family I was trying so desperately to keep. One night, after I'd carried Noah to bed and stepped over the minefield of toys in the hallway, I ended up alone in the living room. No TV on, just me, the couch, and the kind of quiet that makes you think. I found myself drifting back to that 8-year-old kid in the old apartment, the one staring at a note on the counter because his dad decided bills were heavier than his own son. Back then, I swore I'd never be that man. I'd never walk out on my family. And for a long time, I thought staying in a broken, toxic marriage was how you keep that promise. Suck it up. Take the hit. Keep the picture on the wall looking good. But looking at Noah now, safer, calmer, actually smiling more, it hit me. I did leave a marriage, and I did walk away from a woman, but what I didn't walk away from was my son. My marriage failed, but my promise to my son did not. These days, there are no hidden cameras in my house. If something's recording, everyone knows about it. I'm done living with secrets in the walls. As Noah got older, I knew I couldn't just say mom's gone and leave it at that. Kids fill in the blanks with things that are far worse than the truth. So, I started giving him pieces he could handle. Mom made some bad choices. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't because of you. Simple, honest, and age-appropriate. I made myself one more promise. I would never use him as a weapon. No tossing poison about Melissa into his ears just because the court sided with me. He deserves a childhood, not a lifelong custody war. I also started therapy, not because I'm weak, but because I don't want my son growing up with a father who bleeds resentment all over him. I had to deal with my anger, my shame, and my need to always be the strong one. The cameras showed me the truth about my marriage, but therapy showed me the truth about myself. Slowly, the house got quieter in a different way. Less suspicion, fewer shadows, even if there was one less adult living in it. If you're listening to this and you're a guy who's just tried to do it right, go to work, pay the bills, be there when you can, this part is for you. I'm not sitting here pretending I was a perfect husband. I worked too much. I missed some moments. I got short-tempered when I was tired. But I showed up. I put food on the table. I stayed when things got hard. And if that's you too, you need to hear this. You are not an idiot for believing in your marriage. Trust is not the mistake. The person who spits on that trust is the problem. Sometimes walking away from a lie isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's the only way to protect your kid from growing up thinking that betrayal and chaos are normal. Noah doesn't have a perfect family photo anymore, but he has something infinitely better. He knows without a doubt that his dad is here, that when I say I'll be there, I am. You can't control if someone cheats on you, but you can control the kind of father and the kind of man you decide to be in the aftermath. So, that's the whole thing. An 8-year-old kid reading a goodbye note, growing up obsessed with not becoming his father, building a life, a house, and a perfect family, and then watching it all crack open because of a few hidden cameras he installed to keep everyone safe. Those cameras became more than security. They were a mirror I never asked for. They showed me the ugliest truth about my marriage and forced me to decide what kind of father I was going to be. If you're sitting in suspicion or picking up the pieces after being betrayed, hear me, you're not crazy and you're not alone. Your worth isn't measured by someone else's inability to stay loyal. My job now is simple. Protect my son, keep my integrity, and not let what was done to me turn me into something I'm not. Sometimes protecting your family doesn't mean staying. It means having the courage to leave the lie behind forever. Is a spouse who locks their child in a room to facilitate an affair even capable of being a good parent through supervised visits? Or should they lose their parental rights entirely for such a cold-blooded betrayal? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.